Greetings coaches, this is the commish here. In this screencast I'm going to show you a quick anomaly that we have to deal with this year because we've freed up the primary and secondary position, and this is going to come into play when you're picking your team, particularly dealing with players on your interchange bench. So I'm going to quickly go back to Trojan's Choice, that a team I picked earlier in a previous screencast. So this year you can see that we have, I'm going to go with my defenders here, and you can see that we've got defender, midfielder, Jack Nunes is probably a classic case, you can see it a bit better. This year, Jack Nunes on the interchange bench can be used as either a defender or a midfielder. In previous years, I was only able to use him as a defender coming off the interchange bench. But we've freed up that rule this year, and which means now that a player like Jared McVeigh, who's a defender mid, can be used in both positions coming on the interchange bench. Now this is going to come into play based on if two players are a late withdrawal, there may be some anomalies that come into it. So what I'm going to start by talking about is the fundamental rule that applies on the interchange bench. You can see here I've got bench 1, bench 2, bench 3 and bench 4. Bench 1 is the number 1 ranked bench player. So what that means is if I have a midfielder in bench 1 and bench 2 and Joe Watson, for example, pulls out as a late withdrawal, the bench will look straight to bench 1 to put a player in that position. It won't look at the higher score out of bench 1 and bench 2 if they're both mids. It'll just look for the first mid on the interchange bench and will start from bench 1. As soon as it finds a mid, it's gonna implement that score. So in this case here, you've got Mitch Duncan, who's a midfielder, and Jack Grimes, who's a midfielder. If Joe Watson pulls out, even if Jack Grimes scores 150 and Mitch Duncan scores 30, it's going to go to bench 1, find the mid, and put in Mitch Duncan and his score of 30. So fundamentally, you can see there bench 1, bench 2, bench 3 and bench 4 are ranked in order. So you need to choose carefully about which player you have on the interchange bench. That's fairly simple, fairly straightforward. One player out, one player comes in. Okay, now let's have a look at the situation where, let's say I get Joe Watson pulls out and Bryce Gibbs pulls out. What's it going to do? But Bryce Gibbs is a defender, Joe Watson's a midfielder. So in this case, both players pull out. The bench is going to say, okay, I need a defender and I need a midfielder. So it's going to look to bench 1, find its midfielder, bang, throw Mitch Duncan in there. It's going to look to Ben Kennedy, see that he's a forward, no good. Going to look to Jamar, see that he's a ruckman, no good. Then look to Jack Grimes and see him as a defender and go bang, put him in for Bryce Gibbs. Again, fairly straightforward, nothing to worry about there. Okay, so now I'm going to do something slightly different. I'm actually going to put Grimes there first, in second, and I'll throw Ben Kennedy down the bottom there. Okay, same scenario. Both Joe Watson and Bryce Gibbs late withdrawals. As we know, Jack Grimes is a dual position player who has a midfielder and defender status, and Mitch Duncan only has midfield status. Question is, I've got a midfielder and a defender who are late withdrawals. Where does Jack Grimes go? Now the thing is, the bench doesn't have the smarts to decide, oh okay, I can see there's a defender and a midfielder, I'm going to put Jack Grimes in here and Mitch Duncan in there. It may not do that. The bench may go ahead and say, okay, I need a midfielder, and say, oh yes, Jack Grimes is a midfielder, put in Jack Grimes, see no other defenders there and leave me a 0. If this occurs, and it's rare that you're going to have two players at late withdrawals, but of course it may happen. If this occurs, you are encouraged to get in contact with me, the commish, and I will make those adjustments manually if the bench doesn't do it the way that you expect it to. The whole purpose of actually freeing up the primary and secondary position is to be able to give coaches flexibility in that in Jack Grimes, I don't need to put another midfielder on the bench if I think all my mids are going to play, but it's a just in case, and it covers my defenders as well. It allows me to use another interchange spot for maybe a key forward or a key defender. So that's the reason why we've freed that up, to allow more flexibility for coaches. But of course, with flexibility comes anomalies. So If you do have a situation where you've got two players that can legitimately come onto the ground, but the bench doesn't activate it that way, you're encouraged to get in contact with the commish via email at commish@super10.org, and I will make those adjustments manually. Hopefully we don't see too many of them through the season, but it's something to be aware of when naming your players on the interchange bench. Knowing that bench 1 will be the first place it looks, followed by bench 2, bench 3 and bench 4. Hope that clears things up. I thought a visual representation is better than an email representation. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. This is Kamish signing off.